Escalating tensions between two NATO allies. Can relations be repaired, or have we reached a tipping point? Hello and welcome. I'm Ali Janayana from New York. The Square starts now. Turkey and the United States have had close ties for more than 70 years, but that relationship has been tested time and time again. The two countries must work closely together on many issues, but both sides have questioned the ties that bind them, and the future of that relationship has been thrown into doubt. So, what are the major issues facing U.S.-Turkish relations, and how did we get here? Our Nicole Johnston explains.
It was one of Turkey's strongest historic relationships. A Washington-Ankara alliance based on mutual strategic interests. The main one, stability in the Middle East. But that stability was rocked when the region collapsed into chaos and violence during the Arab revolutions in 2011. At the heart of it all was how to deal with several crises, and then the war in Syria. As millions of Syrian refugees fled to southern Turkey, Ankara was drawn into the conflict. A Kurdish militia called the YPG took control of land on the Turkish border. The group is the Syrian arm of the PKK, a designated terrorist group in Turkey, Europe and the United States. But the US government decided to arm the YPG to fight against Daesh, provoking outrage in Ankara. In 2016, a failed coup attempt in Turkey tested the alliance once again. With Ankara expecting its allies to support it, Washington took hours to respond. It's something Turkey has not forgotten. Then the US refused to extradite Fethullah Gulen, the man Turkey accuses of orchestrating the coup. The US wants a man back too. An American pastor is under house arrest in Turkey, accused of being a member of the Gulen group.
Turkey, they have not proven to be a good friend. They have a great Christian pastor there. He's a very innocent man. I'd like to know, unrelated to the pastor, I just think it's a terrible thing that they're holding him.
Ankara says it won't succumb to US pressure.
These threatening remarks against us will not benefit anyone. We showed solidarity with the United States in NATO. We have acted together with them in Korea. Together, we put up many fights. Such a threat against Turkey is not fitting for them.
The list of grievances between the countries is growing. Turkey has bought an air defense system from Russia. And the US is investigating a Turkish bank for allegedly evading sanctions against Iran. Washington has doubled its steel and aluminium tariffs on Turkey. It's difficult to see a way out of this crisis. But as Turkey's relationship with the United States reaches breaking point, Ankara is reaching out to other international partners. And who is likely to benefit from that? Russia and China. Nicole Johnston, TRT World, New York.
While Ankara may be keeping its options open, the people of New York think that it's in both countries' interests to keep the ties strong.
I definitely think that United States and Turkey should keep good relations if they have that. I definitely, as an Americans, hopefully we would want America to keep good relations with, as many people in countries as we can.
The trajectory of our relationship has taken a frightening turn as opposed to a positive one.
They are partners in fighting ISIS, so they should collaborate.
Big nations like Turkey and the United States should be more even-tempered. They should listen to people's voices.
Now, both Turkish and U.S. presidents addressed world leaders at the 73rd UN General Assembly, and in their speeches, U.S. President Donald Trump firmly stated that the U.S. rejected the ideology of globalism, while the Turkish president warned that some countries were trying to create chaos. Those ideologies play out directly in nearby Syria, where Turkey has strongly opposed U.S. policy there. TRT World's Edis Tianshan talked to the Turkish president's spokesman about the two countries' different views.
No, we've been very clear to our American colleagues about their support for PYD and YPG and why that's a very wrong-headed policy. It first of all obviously ends up supporting the PKK in other ways. Everybody knows, American officials also know, that PYD, YPG is PKK in Syria. It's in their official reports. Number two, it poses a serious threat to our national security. Number three, it runs the risk of undermining Syria's territorial integrity. Because if you have one group, which is PYD, YPG, going for some kind of a regional autonomy, because that's what they're aiming, and everybody knows that. They will ask for it at one point. How are you going to keep Syria together if they go for that route? Number four, it creates lots of ethnic tensions among Syrians, because the Americans are basically favoring one particular group, and not all Kurds, by the way, support PYD's, YPG's Marxist-Leninist ideology. And you have one of the greatest ironies in recent history. United States, the vanguard of the free world, so-called free world, free market, capitalism, etc., choosing a Marxist-Leninist organization as its ally in Syria, which is wrong if you look at it from whichever point of view. And we said, look, we can work against Daesh, we can fight Daesh together. Our president made this proposal 2-3 years ago to President Obama when he was in office.
And sir, beyond Syria, we understand that FETÖ continues to be a big problem for Turkey when it comes to the United States. And obviously there has been some kind of a standoff in the last couple of months with the tensions rising over Brunson's detention in Turkey, and then FETÖ's leader as well as the entire organization is still based here. Did this visit give you a chance to maybe make some progress over the talks on that matter?
Well, this obviously is a visit for the UN General Assembly. It's not a bilateral visit to the United States, but we've been talking with American officials about the FETÖ threat and the FETÖ terrorist network in the US. They're very strong here in this country. They use the system to their advantage. They have charter schools, they make money, they run smear campaigns against Turkey, they poison US-Turkish relations, and so in many, many other areas. They are a problem, not just for us, but also for Americans, for American taxpayers, with money laundering, visa fraud, and many other issues. FBI is reportedly looking into some of these cases. Of course, we don't know what will come out of it. But the point is that they are responsible for the killing of 251 people in Turkey, for launching, staging a military coup in Turkey, trying to undermine democracy, trying to destroy an elected government, trying to kill an elected president, our president. And the evidence is out there, and we have provided this evidence. The court cases are out there. There are sentences already given. And in looking at all this, and still you see no action from U.S. authorities on the Gulen network in the U.S. raises lots of questions.
An American pastor under house arrest, economic sanctions, tariffs, and the extradition of accused coup mastermind Fethullah Gulen. These are all issues that are testing relations. So what is the U.S. perspective on all this? Well, I just finished up speaking to former U.S. diplomat Matthew Riza for this edition of The Beat on the Street. So Matthew, President Erdogan was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, and he said that that we must not remain silent to the cancellation of arbitrary commercial agreements, to the spread of protectionism, and the use of sort of economic sanctions as punishment. When you look at the Trump administration, they have engaged in this sort of trade war with many countries around the world, specifically looking at Turkey's, the decisions taken against Turkey and the sanctions. Do they fall into this category?
Well, they do. I mean, the bad news is that the United States is treating so many of its allies in this discriminatory way. From the Trump administration's perspective, the U.S. is just trying to make the rules even. But it seems Turkey is being treated like the other U.S. allies, as well as some adversaries like China. I think it's an unwise policy to treat your allies in this way, especially Turkey, when the latest round of increased sanctions on steel and aluminum were announced at the very moment the finance minister was delivering his speech to explain to the world how Turkey's going to get out of its economic difficulties. So that seemed to me like it was ill-intended, intended to hurt.
But there are many in Turkey that do believe that there are economic retaliations taken for non-economic reasons, and I think you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, you mean Pastor Brunson, I suppose. And I feel with a certain degree of certitude that there was an agreement that was essentially finalized that would have resolved a lot of difficulties, including the Pastor Brunson situation, but that was kind of blown up due to a severe misunderstanding on the part of the United States vis-a-vis President Erdogan. And instead of finalizing that agreement, President Trump issued these threats to increase the tariffs and then did so. And so, the whole tariff increase got caught up in this bilateral legal issue as well.
But Turkey and the United States have a long-standing sort of strategic partnership and alliance that dates back many years, as we just said.
Yeah.
But then you still have the looming punishment against Halkbank. We just talked about whether or not Pastor Andrew Brunson is going to be released, and obviously Fethullah Gulen, which is an extradition case that's been going on for 2.5 years. These cases have severely tainted the relations. How do these countries move forward?
Yeah, that's the key question. I think we need to separate out each of these issues. The Halkbank case is a legal case. It's based on accusations of circumventing U.S. sanctions against Iran. There's been a conviction against an individual, but not the bank. So that means there's plenty of room to negotiate a way forward with regard to the bank itself. And I know those discussions have been going on. The Gulen issue is much more difficult. And if I'm a Turkish person, it's impossible to understand why the most wanted person being behind a coup attempt is given asylum or at least residency status in the United States, and the U.S. isn't doing anything to extradite him. I think the way to fix that is twofold. One, my understanding is there really is a serious investigation underway into the Gulen organization in the U.S. as an organized criminal grouping. Turkey should take some solace in the fact that the U.S. legal system is recognizing the organization for what it is. So the organization is one thing, the man himself is a second one. What the U.S. legal system is saying, in my interpretation, is that if you want him to be extradited for being the ringmaster of a coup attempt, we need a clear-cut, convincing information that a judge will read and say, he organized the coup attempt. And I don't think that information has been presented in such a way that is a firm legal argument, a convincing legal argument. But it could be argued that way.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Erdogan said a court, not politicians, will decide the fate of Pastor Andrew Brunson, whose detention on terrorism charges has hit relations between Ankara and Washington. So why is this particular case at the center of the current tension?
This family, including American Caitlin Coleman, was finally freed from their Taliban-linked captors after being held hostage in Pakistan for 5 years. Do you know how many times Trump tweeted about their plight before their release? 0. How about retired FBI agent Robert Levinson, who the FBI refers to as, quote, the longest held hostage in American history? He served the US for 33 years and is being held by Iran along with 3 other Americans. Guess how many times Trump has tweeted demanding his release? Or any of the 20 or so Americans being held around the world? That's right, 0. So when the President, Vice President, and Secretary of State all tweet or make public statements about one particular person being held in Turkey, well, that person must be an extraordinary case, right? That singular individual is Pastor Andrew Brunson. He is currently under house arrest in Turkey for serious allegations stemming from his links to the FETÖ and PKK terrorist organizations. He's also a prominent Christian evangelical pastor, and that may be the most important fact of this story. And here's why. Evangelicals are a huge part of US President Donald Trump's base, and the pastors of this faith, often through televised services from megachurches, have congregants numbering in the tens of millions. Now, all of this is important to understand because it helps to explain why the top levels of the US government are so intent on bringing this one man home. These pastors hold a huge sway over US policies and politics through their direct access to the hearts and minds of nearly a quarter of all Americans who identify as evangelical Christians. That's a lot of people. Now, their influence isn't as powerful as it was during George W. Bush's presidency, where the, quote, moral majority was in its prime, but they still enjoy a lot of sway. And this case is a big one for the pastors, and so it's a big one for their congregation. And that's tens of millions of potential American voters, and, well, you get the picture. Pastor Brunson is facing serious charges in Turkey, with actual evidence against him. And he's not being held in some prison work camp by some hostile regime. He's on house arrest. But still, his release without a trial is a priority for this American administration. Now, you have to decide. Is this about justice, or is it about votes come this November's election?
With the U.S. midterm elections just weeks away, Turkish-American lawyer Günay Evinç believes that the Brunson case will have political implications and that the separation of powers should be respected throughout the case.
Definitely, this matter does feed the Republican Party's interest in keeping a solid, I would say, Christian fundamentalist base, and having that have a ripple effect to the less conservative Christians. With respect to the case itself, this is a probable cause question for the Turkish court, not for the White House, and not for any other commentary in the U.S. government. I'm a lawyer in Washington, D.C. since 1994. I have a law practice. I have never seen people from the government telling a judge what to do. Basically, if there's going to be a release, it has to be that judge's discretion under the rule of law. If it's not based on that, and it's abundantly clear that it's political, and there's a badgering going on, harassing the judge into a decision, I think that's wrong. And the brunt of that responsibility and blame would go to the United States.
Now, the political spat between the U.S. and Turkey has had major impacts on the people of both countries. And for those who feel ties to both, it's particularly difficult. Many people in America's Turkish community are watching closely, as Lionel Donovan reports.
Mehmet Çil is originally from Turkey's Black Sea region and has been working in kitchens since he was 11 years old. He traveled the world working in ships until he settled down and opened this restaurant in New Jersey. Çil has been following the rise in tensions between the U.S. and Turkey and argues both countries are protecting their own interests.
Muhakkak ki her şeyin bir sonu vardır.
I know that everything ends, and this fight will end too. But we don't know who will win or lose. The issue is who is going to suffer the most damage and how much. I also believe the US doesn't want to lose Turkey as an ally.
But that's not the only problem Turkey has. At this New Jersey mosque, the imam is praying for its economy. The Turkish lira has lost close to 40% of its value against the US dollar since the start of the year, and the diplomatic tension isn't helping.
Trump is a tough guy. He has a lot of haters. He asked for a pastor, but I don't think that's the reason why this thing is going on. I think it's because of Turkish getting close to Russia and Iran and those type of stuff. I believe it's all political rather than economics.
Western economists insist the Turkish president should increase interest rates to stop the lira from falling further. But Recep Tayyip Erdogan argues this will only cause more inflation.
The Turkish authorities have not done what international investors demanded from Turkey, and they demand a large increase of the interest rate. But the Turkish authorities try to get around it, and they're doing little things here and there. But you have to compare the Turkish situation with a big wildfire. And you cannot come with a little garden hose and try to extinguish this fire. You need to come with water-bombing planes.
A restaurant in Jersey seems a world away from the problems between Washington and Ankara. But while customers dig into the food, Erdogan and Trump are also digging in their heels. Lionel Donovan, TRT World.
Well, analysts are keeping a close eye on a weakened Turkish lira and a ballooning current account deficit. That's no secret. But are these moves because of a globally strong dollar, or is the slide accredited to recent developments? Nick Harper reports from outside the New York Stock Exchange.
When it comes to trade and finance, US-Turkey relations are currently rocky. Here at a business dinner in New York City on Wednesday evening, President Erdogan said that the Trump administration is using trade as a means to achieve political goals. A diplomatic dispute has essentially kicked off an economic crisis between the two countries. Washington angered that Ankara refused to release a US pastor jailed in Turkey. Last month, it doubled tariffs against Turkish-made aluminium and steel. Aluminium jumping to a 20% tax, steel to 50%. The US president saying at the time that relations with Turkey are not good. Well, Ankara retaliated, imposing its own tariffs on US-made goods. US alcohol increased to 140% tax. American-made cars entering Turkey jumped to 120% tax. And all of this is important because trade between the two countries is significant. Last year, $20 billion worth of trade was done between the US and Turkey. But President Erdogan says that the trade balance favors the United States, and yet the Trump administration is taking protectionist measures by using tariffs. Well, all of this has had a significant impact on the lira, which has dropped about 40% against the dollar so far this year, and there are worries that there may be more problems to come. The US has threatened sanctions on Turkey, and it has prompted President Erdogan to say that the historically good relationship between the US and Turkey is now facing a historic test.
Well, Turkey's finance minister Berat Albayrak says that trade data shows the rebalancing of the current account deficit, as well as the announcement of the new economic program, will help smooth out any bumps in the future. So how has this current rift between Ankara and Washington affected business ties, and is it likely to dampen future investment? To discuss this, I'm joined from Washington by Senior Vice President for Middle East and Turkey Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Krish Chokski, and here in New York is Attorney Ayhan Öymen. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on the Square. Krish, let me start with you in Washington. Now, when you look at the current relations, many issues are over the ties between the two countries. How does the U.S. Chamber of Commerce sort of promote business and trade when you have such a sort of negative environment?
Well, you know, the relationship between Turkey and the United States has had its ups and downs. But U.S. companies, and particularly if you look at 2017, the overall trade and investment between the United States and Turkey increased. Now, clearly, the recent economic and political tensions are not favorable. But that said, we are cautiously optimistic that those issues will be resolved. And certainly if they are, and particularly if they are resolved expeditiously, there is a tremendous opportunity for further growth. In New York recently, the Turkish Minister for Finance met with our members, and we had a very good roundtable that provided an opportunity for exchange. But I would like to say that as overall, Turkey has been extremely open and hospitable to American businesses.
Okay, Ayhan, I want to turn to you. Krish just said in Washington, D.C. that they were cautiously optimistic. But does Turkey feel that there are deliberate obstacles sort of put in their way?
Yes, lately, Ali, if you look at it, you will see that, the economic ties are important between two countries. But seeing that political issues becoming hurdle and becoming in part of the barring the economical improvement. So what's the most interesting part is to see that Turkey had long time good relationship with the US and with NATO, with Middle East, with a bunch of other issues. And with this new administration, you see that all of a sudden things change and in a way that Turkey has never done anything, never helped the US. So that political part becomes big hurdle on actual economical issues. This is why I think, yes, I agree with him too, that Turkey has been open, trying to fix the issues economical way and and investment-wise, but we're seeing actually U.S. administration being tough on Turkey, considering that trying to implement things on judicial part. So this is why we believe that another interesting thing it will be I just wanted to add it's interesting to see that the U.S. actually is based on the ideology of free markets, capitalism, globalism, and where now we see administration,
All right, Kush, I want to turn to you. So how do you sort of explain the current sort of Trump administration's trade policy?
Well, you know, we certainly would hope that the political issues and the economic issues are separated from each other. And we certainly at the Chamber have advocated for that separation, particularly when it comes to unilateral economic sanctions regarding trade and tariffs. So, you know, certainly that can have the potential to further impact negatively the economic relationship. But that said, again, you know, coming back to my previous comment of being cautiously optimistic, Turkey is launched on a national transformation program, and we see opportunities in the aviation sector, in the technology sector, and certainly in ICT and healthcare.
All right. I'm going to give the last word to you, Ayhan. So how do these countries move forward? Kush said that we need to separate these issues, but there is a notion that some of the sanctions and decisions that were taken against Turkey have nothing to do with trade or economics. They were politically motivated.
I 100% agree with you, but I think I also want to look at it from the optimistic side, where I think the idea here is if political and strategic cooperation can move together here and try to both sides to actually come into understanding to resolve the issues and separate them from each other, as you know, he mentioned also, you know, to try to see the economical and political things separated from each other to make sure that we resolve these issues. That's why I believe there's a room to grow, there's a room to fix these issues, and to make sure that U.S. and Turkey become stronger again.
All right, so both sides are actually painting a positive picture. Ayhan Öymen in New York and Kush Çaksi in Washington, D.C. Thanks to both of you. Now, we've heard from both of our guests from the U.S. side as well as Turkey. They discussed what ties them together and what keeps them apart. These countries have had a rocky relationship at times, but it's in both countries' interest to keep the alliance together. Well, that's it from us here. Thanks to our team in New York, and we'll see you next time on The Square.